My sister claimed ownership of the $30 million enterprise I dedicated 5 years to creating, right in the middle of Dad's birthday celebration. I held my tongue, but what followed wasn't part of their plan. I'm Lawrence Shaw, and for 10 years, I poured my heart into our family's woodworking company. What began as a modest repair workshop grew into a $30 million custom furniture business under my guidance. A triumph, right? I thought so too, until everything shifted dramatically. Our family's company was Dad's greatest pride. It all started with a small carpentry shop my father, Jack Shaw, launched 18 years ago in a rented space on Main Street. Initially, it was just him crafting bespoke furniture for locals. Dining tables, chairs, cabinets, that sort of thing. He was skilled, but the business never generated much profit. He kept it running and provided for us, but that was the extent of it. My older sister Morgan and I grew up with the shop as a constant presence. Morgan was always Dad's favorite. She was the quintessential high achiever, Ivy League business degree, internships at prestigious firms, the full package. I was the grounded one. I attended a local community college for graphic design and helped Dad at the shop after classes. I suppose I didn't shine as brightly as Morgan, but I was fine with that. I'm not one for the spotlight, yet I adored the shop. I loved watching raw wood transform into something stunning. I enjoyed collaborating with clients to bring their visions to life. Dad didn't always value my suggestions, but he relied on me to manage daily operations while he focused on crafting. Meanwhile, Morgan was off in another city, thriving as a consultant for a top-tier firm. She only returned for holidays, often remarking that I was squandering my potential. "You could do so much more than this, Lauren," she'd say, as if I wasn't aware. During my final year of college, I began envisioning ways to modernize the business. The bespoke furniture was wonderful, but it wasn't scalable. We couldn't expand with Dad handcrafting every item, so I taught myself 3D design tools and developed a line of customizable furniture. Clients could select a base model and adjust dimensions, colors, and finishes. It preserved the personal touch while optimizing production. I presented the concept to Dad, and he was skeptical. He'd done things his way for years and saw no need for change. Still, I built a prototype and showed it to a loyal client, a local boutique owner. She ordered 10 pieces immediately. When Dad saw the payment, he finally said, "Maybe you've got something here, kid." That single order sparked more, and soon we had a steady flow of customers. After graduating, I dove in fully. I revamped the workshop, hired a few local workers to assist with production, and established a social media presence. It was exhausting. I'd put in 12 to 14-hour days, often 7 days a week. Meanwhile, Morgan was in Chicago, living a glamorous life. High-flying job, chic apartment, exotic vacations. She didn't care much about the shop then. I guess it wasn't exciting enough for her. By year 3, we hit $2 million in sales. We'd evolved from a small-town workshop to a respected name in custom furniture. I secured deals with boutique hotels and interior designers, unlocking a new market. Over time, that steady climb turned Shaw Designs into a $30 million enterprise. Something I never imagined possible at the start. The business was flourishing, and for the first time, Dad seemed truly impressed. He was tough to please, so hearing him tell his friends, "Lauren's why this place is thriving," meant everything. But then Morgan decided she wanted a piece of it. Out of the blue, she called, saying she was considering leaving her Chicago job. She claimed she'd always dreamed of returning to the family business. That was news to me. She'd never shown any interest before. But Dad? He was over the moon. "Both my daughters running the company? That's the dream," he said. I didn't want to crush his enthusiasm, so I kept my doubts quiet. When Morgan moved back, Dad didn't just hire her. He named her co-CEO, no discussion. She knew nothing about woodworking, design, or our operations, but her shiny MBA was enough for Dad. "She's got the business know-how," he said. "You handle the creative side. You'll complement each other." At first, I tried to make it work. I focused on design and production while Morgan took on marketing and PR. She had some solid ideas, like getting us into trade shows and partnering with influencers. But she also made decisions without consulting me, committing to projects we couldn't handle or promising impossible deadlines. It frustrated me, but Dad always defended her. "She's just pushing for growth," he'd say, as if I wasn't. I told myself that as long as the business was succeeding, it didn't matter who got the praise. But it soon became clear Morgan wasn't here to help. She was here to dominate. The business didn't feel unified anymore. It was like two clashing entities forced together, and I was the one being pushed aside. Morgan wasn't just contributing, she was seizing control. She started by hiring a marketing team, dismissing my years of social media and client outreach. Sure, I wasn't a marketing expert, but I'd built genuine connections with our clients, connections that led to contracts and loyalty. Morgan treated me like an amateur. "We need experts, Lauren," she said, as if that solved everything. I swallowed my pride and let her bring in her team, hoping it would lighten my load. Her team didn't understand us. Our success came from authenticity, custom designs, personal relationships, but they rolled out generic, polished campaigns. One day, I saw an Instagram post from our account that read, "Luxury furniture for all lifestyles." I nearly choked on my coffee. All lifestyles? We specialized in high-end, bespoke pieces, not mass-market furniture. When I raised the issue, Morgan brushed me off. "This is how you grow, Lauren. Wider reach, bigger profits," she said, her tone patronizing. "Growth is fine, but not at the cost of alienating the clients who built us." Morgan either didn't understand or didn't care. Her fixation on bigger and better didn't stop there. For years, we operated out of a workshop next to the storefront. It wasn't fancy, but it was functional. Morgan despised it. "We need a larger space," she announced, like it was obvious. I pointed out that we didn't need half the space she was proposing. She didn't listen. "Big clients expect big businesses, Lauren," she said, like she was quoting a business manual. Dad supported her, and soon we were locked into a 5-year lease on a massive warehouse. It was all about appearances. Glass offices, a sleek showroom, the works. It looked impressive, but it was a nightmare. Orders were delayed because the team couldn't navigate the new setup, and production slowed significantly. I spent late nights fixing the mess while Morgan gave tours to investors, basking in praise for a space she didn't understand. Worse, she started undermining my team. The designers and craftsmen, loyal for years, trusted my leadership. Morgan didn't like that. She began assigning tasks directly, bypassing me. One day, a designer showed me a sketch saying, "Morgan assigned this and said you approved it." I hadn't even seen it. When I confronted her, she barely glanced up from her laptop. "It's called delegating, Lauren. You should try it," she said with a smug smirk, as if she hadn't disrupted my entire process. Then there were the meetings. Countless meetings I wasn't invited to. Vendors, clients, potential partners. Morgan handled them all, and I'd only find out afterward. Once I arrived at work to learn she'd pitched a furniture line to a retailer without telling me. The designs weren't even production ready. "Why didn't you inform me?" I asked, struggling to stay calm. She shrugged. "It's not a big deal," she said, as if pitching unfinished work to a major client was routine. Her power grabs grew bolder. She hired a strategic consultant named Eric, who spouted buzzwords like a self-help guru. Synergy, optimization, expansion. He suggested outsourcing production overseas. "You'll save millions," he said, waving a chart. I was stunned. "We're built on quality and customization," I said. "Mass production would destroy what sets us apart." Morgan rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic, Lauren. This is how businesses scale." It wasn't about scaling, it was about control. Morgan wasn't improving the company. She was reshaping it to fit her vision, no matter the cost. The breaking point came during a meeting with a potential partner. Morgan introduced herself as the mastermind behind the company, claiming credit for ideas I'd developed from scratch. She didn't hesitate as she rewrote history in front of everyone. Afterward, I couldn't stay silent. "Never take credit for my work again," I told her, my voice firm. She shrugged like it was trivial. "It's not about you, Lauren. It's about the company." But it wasn't. It was about her. By then, the business I'd poured my soul into was unrecognizable. The clients I'd cultivated, the team I'd led, the culture we'd created, it was all slipping away. And Dad? He didn't care. As long as the numbers were strong, he stayed out of it. Just as I was grappling with these changes, the day arrived that changed everything. Dad's 58th birthday. By the time the party rolled around, I was exhausted and barely holding on. Morgan had taken over so much that I felt like an outsider in my own company. Quitting crossed my mind more than once, but deep down, I couldn't let go. Not after everything I'd sacrificed. Morgan took charge of the party, and it was obvious from the start that it wasn't about honoring Dad. It was about showcasing herself. She made every decision without input. I considered skipping it, but Mom pleaded, "It's your father's special day, Lauren." So, reluctantly, I went. I had a sinking feeling this night would be anything but simple. Dad's birthday was meant to celebrate him, to honor his legacy with the family and the business. Instead, it became something else entirely. The moment I stepped into the banquet hall Morgan had booked, I knew this wasn't a typical family event. The venue was extravagant, pristine tablecloths, an elaborate dessert display straight out of a magazine. It didn't reflect Dad at all. Dad loved casual barbecues and a cold drink with friends. Morgan had turned this into a corporate affair. She'd invited a mix of guests, family, old friends, business contacts, and investors. Half the room barely knew Dad beyond his title as Shaw Designs founder. It felt more like a business mixer than a birthday party. But that was Morgan's way. Everything had to serve her agenda. I arrived early, hoping to help. Morgan was already buzzing around, directing every detail. When I offered to assist, she dismissed me like I was a nuisance. Fine. I focused on greeting guests and chatting with Dad's old friends. Dinner began quietly. The food was excellent, and for a moment, I let myself relax, thinking we might avoid drama. Then Morgan stood up and tapped her glass. The room's chatter faded. I expected a heartfelt toast about Dad, maybe a childhood anecdote, something warm. But as she spoke, I realized this wasn't about Dad. She started with a brief nod to Dad's hard work and the company's origins. I nodded, waiting for her to pivot back to him. Instead, she shifted to Shaw Design's future and the steps needed for sustainable growth. My stomach dropped. This sounded like a corporate pitch, not a birthday speech. I glanced around. Others looked puzzled, too. She said, "As we celebrate Dad's milestone, it's also the ideal moment to announce exciting changes for Shaw Designs." Her voice was brimming with assurance. Then she locked eyes with me. "After discussions with key advisors, we've decided the company needs a singular vision moving forward. Effective immediately, I'll be assuming the role of sole CEO." She didn't waver, staring at me like she was challenging me to react. She wasn't just announcing a takeover, she was doing it publicly, in front of family, clients, and investors, leaving no room for debate. This wasn't a conversation, it was a proclamation. The room erupted in applause while I sat frozen, as Morgan turned a corporate update into a personal attack. "Some individuals in the company," she said, her tone laced with false pity, "are better suited to technical tasks than leadership." Then, addressing me directly, she continued, "My sister Lauren, who's been committed to the creative side, has been invaluable. But to thrive in today's market, we need vision, excellence, and frankly, Lauren, you're not equipped for this level of leadership." I stared at her, grappling with her audacity. I looked to Dad, hoping he'd intervene, but he just nodded, beaming like Morgan had delivered a masterpiece. Mom avoided my gaze, her hands shaking as she stared at her plate. Morgan pressed on, her voice growing bolder. "The reality is," she declared, "you're outdated in today's business landscape, Lauren. Your traditional ideas and lack of formal business training are a liability. It's time for you to step back gracefully." The room fell silent, heavy with tension. Every eye turned to me, anticipating my reaction. I felt the pity, the scrutiny, the murmurs forming. Everything I'd worked for, every late night, every sacrifice, was being dismantled in front of people I respected. They probably expected me to collapse or lash out, but I refused to give them that. I stood slowly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I grabbed my purse, walked to Dad's table, and placed the small, wrapped gift I'd brought in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, my voice steady. Without waiting for a response, I turned and left, head held high as the whispers trailed me out the door. The drive home was a haze. My mind replayed the night endlessly. I thought of all the nights I'd spent at the shop, the deals I'd secured, the client relationships I'd nurtured, and now Morgan was erasing it all. By the time I reached home, my shock had hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about Morgan's takeover. It was her calculated public betrayal. She didn't just sideline me. She tried to obliterate me. That wasn't happening. I stayed up all night. My desk was littered with papers, files, and records, but it wasn't disarray. It was strategy. Every document, every detail from years of work was a weapon in my arsenal. This wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It was preparation. I didn't sleep. By dawn, I had a solid plan. Morgan wanted a performance? I'd give her one, but this time, I'd write the script. The next morning, I was at the office before it opened. I wasn't just early. I was prepared. I had everything organized, mentally and physically. Morgan arrived at 9 a.m., strutting in with her usual confidence. Dad followed, carrying a bag of leftover party decorations. They looked like they'd already claimed victory. "What are you doing here so early?" Morgan asked, tossing her bag onto the conference table. "After last night, I thought you'd have the sense to stay away." I leaned back in my chair, composed. "Just wrapping up some details," I said, letting the words linger. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my tablet, activated it, and slid it across the table. "Let's discuss Shaw Design's future," I said, connecting it to the conference room screen. The ownership agreement from 3 years ago appeared, clear as day. Morgan barely glanced at it, lounging in her chair like she'd already won. Dad wasn't much better. He folded his arms and said, "There's nothing to discuss." Morgan's in charge now. I raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Is that so?" "Let's review that," I said, scrolling to the critical section and zooming in. "Remember the warehouse expansion, Dad? You sold me an additional 13% of the company. That makes my total ownership 53%. I'm the majority shareholder." I turned to Morgan, my voice unwavering. "You gave a nice speech last night. But you don't have the power to change leadership without my approval, and I didn't approve. Morgan froze mid-note, finally looking up. That's impossible, she said. It's not just possible, it's fact, I countered, flipping to the next page. Here's your signature, Dad. You were so eager to close the deal you didn't even negotiate, Dad cut in. I didn't think you'd use it against your own family. Against my family? I echoed. Funny, I don't recall being consulted before someone announced a leadership change at a party in front of our clients. Morgan leaned forward, trying to regain control. Lauren, be reasonable. This isn't about shares or documents. The company needs a leader with vision. You're great at design, but running a business? That's not your forte. I smiled, pulling up the next file. You're right, Morgan. Leadership requires vision. So let's talk about what really drives this company. The core designs that account for 80% of our revenue, they're owned by my separate entity, Artisan Concepts. Shaw Designs only has a licensing agreement to use them. That agreement expired this morning. Morgan's eyes darted to the screen, scanning the licensing terms. You're joking, she said, her voice sharp. I'm not, I replied. Without those designs, Shaw Designs has nothing to sell. I've chosen not to renew the agreement, effective immediately. Those designs are no longer available to this company. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this. You'd ruin everything we've built. I didn't flinch. No, Dad. I'm safeguarding what I built. While Morgan was busy giving speeches and hiring PR firms, I was the one keeping this company alive. The clients, the production, the designs, that was me. And you both thought you could erase me. Morgan stood, pacing as if searching for an escape. This is absurd, Lauren. You're destroying your own company to make a point. Oh, it gets better, I said, pulling up another document. Last night, I emailed our major clients about the leadership changes and my exit. Remember those contracts I negotiated? Most include clauses allowing clients to cancel if I'm no longer involved. Want to see how many have already invoked those clauses? I displayed the email responses one by one. Client names appeared, each confirming their intent to terminate their contract with Shaw Designs. That's just the beginning, I said, scrolling through the list. By day's end, most of our revenue will be gone. The room went quiet. Through the glass walls, we saw employees clustering, their murmurs growing as they checked their emails. Phones glowed, laptops opened, and eyes turned toward the conference room. Morgan's facade crumbled. She grabbed her phone, scrolling frantically. You can't do this, she said, her voice unsteady. The company! You're ruining the company! I leaned forward, watching her unravel. The company? I said. The one you tried to steal? The one you thought you could claim because you have an MBA and Dad's blessing? Her phone clattered to the table. That company, I continued, standing and adjusting my blazer, stops existing the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. I paused, letting the silence sink in. So, here's the deal. Option 1. I walk away with my shares, my designs, my clients, and my team. Shaw Designs becomes a hollow shell, and you get to explain to all those VIPs from last night why the company's worth nothing overnight. Morgan tried to interrupt, but I cut her off. Or option 2. I leave completely, taking my designs, my team, and my clients. Shaw Designs becomes just a name. Your call. The tension was palpable as they realized I wasn't bluffing. Dad slumped in his chair, defeated. You're serious, he said softly. As serious as Morgan was when she announced her takeover, I replied. Dad looked at me, then at Morgan, and finally spoke. Morgan, you need to resign. She looked ready to argue, but she knew it was over. Slowly, she nodded, grabbing a pen to sign the resignation papers. The rest of the meeting was a whirlwind of documents and formalities. Morgan signed her resignation, and just like that, her stint as co-CEO ended. By noon, I was alone in my office, staring at the company I'd fought to reclaim. It was mine again, but it didn't feel like a win. The rift with my family was deep, and I wasn't sure we'd ever heal. Mom visited that evening, her face heavy with regret. Did it have to end like this? She asked. I told her they left me no choice. The next day, I started rebuilding. This was my company now, and no one would take it from me again. The fallout hit hard. By the time Morgan cleared out, the office was abuzz with gossip. Employees who'd followed her lead were now scrambling to adapt. Some worried about job security, others were unsure who to report to. The division she'd created lingered like a fresh wound. The first weeks after the upheaval were chaotic. I spent every moment extinguishing crises. Clients who'd left due to Morgan's changes needed reassurance that the company was stable. Contracts in limbo required renegotiation. It was grueling, but for the first time in months I felt in command. Morgan, however, didn't fade quietly. A week after leaving, rumors spread that she was claiming I'd undermined her. She portrayed herself as the victim, saying I'd sabotaged her vision for Shaw Designs. It was ridiculous, but she was relentless. Some of her industry contacts started calling me a control freak, accusing me of refusing to share power. I ignored it at first. The results spoke for themselves. Clients returned because they trusted me, not out of sympathy. But when a vendor hesitated to renew, citing leadership instability, I knew I had to act. So I held a company-wide meeting. Everyone, from warehouse staff to designers, gathered in the conference room as I laid out the truth. I didn't hold back. I explained Morgan's missteps, how they'd jeopardized the company, and my plan to fix it. This isn't just about me, I said. It's about protecting what we've built together. I need all of you on board. The room was quiet, but the mood shifted. People approached me afterward, pledging their support. The trust Morgan had tried to fracture was slowly mending. 2 months later, Dad retired. I think he finally saw that his favorite daughter had nearly destroyed his legacy. He didn't make a fuss, no party, no announcement. He just stopped showing up. I think he was ashamed of how things unfolded. He'd backed Morgan, only to watch her nearly ruin the business. Our conversations in those early months were brief and tense. Mom, ever the mediator, tried to smooth things over. "Your father didn't mean for this to happen," she said over dinner one night. "He's proud of both of you, just differently. He thought he was doing what was best." I didn't have the strength to debate. I just nodded and let her talk. Morgan, meanwhile, kept stirring the pot. Within a month, she landed a job at a California startup. She posted on LinkedIn about new chapters and how her time at Shaw Designs taught her valuable lessons. She didn't mention me, but the implications were clear. I didn't cut her off, but kept my distance. Family gatherings were strained. Christmas that year was the final straw. I knew it would be tense, but it was worse than I'd feared. Morgan and I hadn't been in the same room since the company drama, and this was our first encounter. I should have skipped it, but for Mom's sake, I showed up. Morgan arrived late, strutting in like a star. She gave Mom a perfunctory hug, ignored me, and went straight to Dad, who lit up like she was royalty. They spent the morning whispering and laughing in a corner while I helped Mom set the table. I wasn't bitter, well, maybe a little, but I stayed quiet. Mom was stressed enough and I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to survive dinner and leave. Dinner was as awkward as expected. Morgan focused on charming Dad, ignoring me. She rambled about a major consulting gig and her next big venture. Typical Morgan. Mom tried to include me. "So, Lauren," she said, shifting gears, "how's the business going?" "It's been a strong year," I said, keeping it brief. I wasn't giving Morgan any openings, but she couldn't resist. "A strong year," she said, smirking, "or just a fluke?" Her tone was infuriating. Mom gave me a pleading look, and Dad kept eating, oblivious. I could have fired back, but why bother? Morgan fed on reactions, and I wasn't playing her game. I ignored her, focusing on my food and pretending she wasn't there. After dinner, I thought I'd escaped. Morgan was occupied with Dad, and I planned to slip out quietly. But she cornered me in the living room, her voice low so no one else could hear. "You must be so pleased with yourself," she sneered. "You've got the company. You're the big shot now. But don't think this will last, Lauren. You'll mess it up eventually." I stared at her, keeping my expression neutral. Inside, I was raging, but I wouldn't give her the reaction she wanted. "If that's all, Morgan, I'd like to enjoy what's left of the holiday," I said, my voice calm. She gave a bitter chuckle. "Always the martyr," she muttered, walking away. The rest of the night was a disaster. Dad retreated to his study, as he does when things get messy, and Mom tried to keep the holiday spirit alive, but she looked exhausted. The tension was suffocating, and by the time Morgan left, I was drained from staying composed. That night, I reflected on the fights, the resentment, the endless power struggles. Morgan had turned our family business into a battlefield, and no matter what I did, it wouldn't change. I couldn't fix this. I didn't even want to try anymore. The next morning, I decided I was done. No more pretending we could return to how things were. Morgan had made it clear there was no relationship to save, and I couldn't stand being near her. I blocked her number and cut her out of my life, and it felt liberating. Without Morgan, I could focus on what mattered. The company was flourishing under my leadership, and for the first time in years, I felt I was building something truly mine. The shallow, flashy marketing was gone, replaced by authentic campaigns that connected with our clients. My team was thriving too. Designers who'd been silenced under Morgan were now proposing bold ideas, and production was smoother than ever. If you enjoyed this story and felt the emotions behind it, don't forget to give it a like, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life experiences and heartfelt stories. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring more content like this to you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.